The next portion of our presentation about the essay. And so I can jump in and start with putting it into context of the essay. So why the essay matters and why it's important in the process. And specifically for small liberal arts colleges, the holistic review process is how we evaluate applications. And the essay is a big piece of that. Because it provides some really wonderful context to you as a person. So in holistic review, we essentially look at everything that you're providing us in the application. And our goal as institutions is to to bring in a diverse class of students that continue to contribute to the community that's already built and enhance that community, add more diversity and more perspective to the community we have already built. And so to do that, we need to look beyond your metrics, beyond just the grades. And while those things are particularly important because we are educational institutions, we are eager to get to know who you are, what motivates you, what drives you, the accomplishments that you've had in your life thus far, the values that are important to you, and also what you are looking for in your college experience. And what we want to do is find students that are going to contribute to our colleges, but also benefit from our colleges, specifically through the lens of our missions and values, which you just heard a little bit about from both Adam and I. And you can see where some of those lenses differ a little bit. So your background, all the information, your demographic information is helpful to us. We want to understand your life within your school, within your family, within your communities. And then we want to hear from you through the essay and other portions of the application. Adam, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that actually is really important information to know. The essay doesn't define you. The essay is part of an application that we hope gives us lots of different ways to see you and think about in lots of different spaces, academic spaces, non-academic spaces. And so the essay is just one part of a longer application. I think one of the things that's important to note here is also that the application itself is actually one of the things that you have a choice about. So both of us accept the coalition application and the common application. They're similar, but they're a little different. The number of prompts is a little bit different. Maybe the word choices for some of those essay prompts is some are shorter, some are longer. But the reality is that both applications, whichever one you choose to complete, we treat them equally. We don't have a preference for either the Common App or the Coalition App. Whichever one you submit, you'll be read the same. The essay prompts themselves are a little bit different for each school, and some institutions who have a Coalition App and a Common App. Other applications like the Universal application or the QuestBridge application, you'll see several different kinds of applications out there. We're focusing on the Common App and the Coalition because those are the most common for international students that you'll see. But just know that there are some choices. You can complete a Coalition, you can complete a Common App. The only thing I would sort of add is that each institution might have specific questions or specific kinds of essays on the Coalition App and the Common App that are unique to that institution. And then the application will have often a sort of universal or common essay that you write once. And that essay is submitted to all of the colleges and universities that you apply to. So just sort of know there's two types of essays: of the universal essay, which goes to everyone, and then there's the specific essays that you have to write for each school. That's important because it takes time. So just make sure that as you think about your planning and your timeline and your calendar, that you're allowing enough time to be able to complete all the requirements for each of the colleges and universities that you're applying to as you're moving through either the Coalition platform or the Common App platform. The next slide is really about prompts. And I think one of the things that is so important here is that you're going to have a lot of choices. And when you think about what you want to write about, that's a great thing to think about. But you also want to think about which of the questions best suits you when it comes to conveying your skills, your talents, your thoughts, your reflections, your ideas, your hopes, your goals, all of those things that often are communicated in an essay. There's lots of ways where the selection of the right prompt can actually help you craft a better essay. So thinking about and reflecting on some times in your life when you learned something about yourself, maybe it was a really difficult class and how you struggled to improve your grade in a class, or how you struggled to learn material in a class. Maybe it was a time in an extracurricular activity where you were struggling with leadership and you had to learn how to lead a group of people that might have been very different from you. And so you have to learn how to communicate across difference and learn across difference. Maybe it was a time recently during the pandemic that you had to play a new role in your family, or you had to serve in a new way in your school or in your community or in your home life. And how did you adjust? How did you adapt? How did you grow? It can be very personal to write an essay sometimes, and other times you might have common experiences, but your common experience can still be very unique. So don't think that you have to write about something so specific that it could only happen to you. Sometimes you might write about a topic that actually happens to a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people. That is a very common experience, but you had a unique moment having that experience. So in the United States, for example, it's a rite of passage for you to learn how to drive in high school. And so I've read a lot of essays about what happened when I learned how to drive, right? And so a student in New York City might write a very different essay than a student who might be from rural Indiana when it comes to learning how to drive. So perspective matters, but the experience was a universal experience, a common experience, that learning how to drive experience. I'm sure you can think about things like that that might be common to growing up in your part of the world or in your city or in your part of your country, that might be universal to many high schoolers, but are sort of individual and unique to you. So you can be creative in how you think about approaching the question or addressing the question. And I think most importantly, and we put this near the top because it's important, you should really talk about something that matters to you, something that has some meaning to you, because prompts are really related to what you're trying to say about how unique you are, about how some kind of value that you might bring to an institution, be it a perspective or a lived experience or a set of ideas that you want to pursue at that institution. Everybody's unique. And I know a lot of students don't think that. A lot of students think that they're kind of normal, right? They just sort of, there's nothing that they can stand out, use to stand out. And that just isn't true. Everybody has something about them that is unique, that's worth conveying. And the challenge is to really think hard and reflect on your life and on who you've been and who you're becoming, to really think about that from a different perspective. So we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll give it back to Jen.
Yes. So thanks, Adam. That was so helpful. The school-specific essays are a little bit different, but not that different. I think a lot of what Adam talked about as far as that reflection and thinking about yourself is really important. Now, the hard part about this slide is that the school-specific essays are going to range quite a lot. So there are some institutions that have different questions every year. There are some institutions that have the same questions and they're posted on our websites and you can look at them in advance, and they're likely not to change. There's some institutions with, where they're short responses, like a few hundred words each, and more of a short essay, versus some that have like rapid fire almost type responses that are goofy and funny. And for me, that would be my nightmare. That would be so hard. So you're going to have a variety of schools with a lot of different kinds of questions. And I think what's important is, much like what you're trying to do in your application, is provide your unique personality. I think what you're seeing from the college specific essays is you're seeing a bit of the college's personality, and the things they ask these questions because they're trying to get to know you and see that match between you and the institution. And so they're asking these questions through the lens of their mission and the values they have, and the things that they find really important and are trying to pull out of the application. We would not ask these questions unless we really wanted to know the answers. So just know that they are asked for a reason and they are looked at in particular ways. And don't be afraid to ask admission officers at the schools that you're applying to any follow-up questions you might have about them. I answer questions like that all the time. If there's clarification and trying to really understand what we're getting at, I'm always happy to share insights. But you do, in addition to wanting to provide insight of yourself through these responses, you do want, it's important to have done research about the institution. That's how you're going to start to understand these questions and what they're trying to get at, and not be overly confused by some of them if they are particularly unique. But if you have a sense of the college, their mission, their unique qualities as an institution, if you've connected with the admission officer, gone to information sessions, virtual tours, talked to students, it'll all start to come together. And again, regardless of what types of questions, being really focused on answering those questions through the lens of why do you want to go to that college? Like that's what you should be thinking about when you write these questions. So shut off all the other colleges, focus on each one at a time, and really give each of those colleges the time and attention that they're going to give you when they review your application, and answer those questions through the lens of why you actually like that institution, and don't try to answer what you think they want to hear, because you'd be surprised. I think we're pleasantly surprised by the diversity of answers we receive. So the organization of the essay, I can't remember, is that me or you? I can jump in. Oh, you're on.
I was on mute. My fault. This is really about how and why. So how to do the writing, just very practical tips, mechanics on things to use, ways to think about the actual sort of process of writing, and the why, the philosophy. Why are you writing about this topic, or why are you choosing this prompt? And I think it's important to talk about that. Very simply, I had an English teacher in college who used to say that writing is a process, not a divine event. And I think that's true, because you often don't write an essay and then you end it and in the first draft say, oh, this is perfect, right? Most of the time, your writing is good, but it could always be better. And so your best writing is about having a good writing process, using things like Excel and Google Docs, using project management software like Trello. When do you want to have your first draft done? When do you want to have your second draft done? Thinking about who your reviewer might be. Who do you want to share your writing with? Different ways of getting feedback. Maybe it's a formal set of feedback notes from a teacher, and maybe the second draft is an informal set of feedback notes from a peer, right? And so as you think about the process, you want to think about the fact that your first draft isn't going to be what you submit to the colleges and universities. So how do you get from the first draft to the final draft? And that's really where you can think about the mechanics of the writing. The only thing that we would really caution is that you think about really hard about recycling essays that you might use for one college that you would try to reuse and reuse and reuse for other colleges. And the reason is not that you are not able to produce good writing. It's that, as Jen talked about earlier, when you're writing for specific audiences or answering specific questions at specific universities, it might not always translate very well when you're trying to jump from one application at one university to another application at another university. And so really think hard and really ask yourself, does this actually answer the question this college or university is asking? Because you want to not just write an essay once and then conveniently reuse it 3 times if it's not going to help you. It's better to take a little more time to plan out and calendar out the writing process so that you can have time to write 3 great essays for the 3 colleges and universities you're applying to that don't have a lot of recycled material, but are a little bit more original in the way in which you've crafted them. Of course, it's always good to prioritize your match or reach schools first. So those schools that you know you want that might be perhaps more selective, or that you might think are going to be a little bit harder for you to get into. You might want to think about spending a little more time on those essays, making sure every little thing is right, that you're confident before you send that in. And then you also want to think about early schools versus regular decision schools. So if you have a school you're applying early action or early decision to, obviously that's an essay you need to write first. And you need to think about those essays first, just because they're going to be due first. You're going to have to submit them first. The second piece really is about the philosophy on brainstorming, drafting, writing. I talked a little bit about that already, but I really want to stick to that top bullet point, which is that writing is about self-discovery. And I really think the test is, if you start writing essays, let's say you started, last month writing essays, and you're going to finish writing all of your essays by the end of November. My hope is that between September and November, you know a little bit more about yourself. You've learned a little bit more about yourself. You've grown, you've become a little wiser, a little more mature about who you are and what you're thinking is important in the world. Because writing is a good way to reflect on the things you value, and it's a good way to discover something about yourself in a very intentional way. And that really is something that can be achieved if you do it the right way when it comes to writing college essays. And this is, I think, one of our final slides. This is our do's and don'ts tip. So I'll start with the do's and I'll throw the don'ts to Jen. But I think that one of the things that's really important when you think about the do's is you absolutely have to write about something that you're excited about. So you should write about a topic that you care about, that you're excited to write about, that you know about. Always write what you know. That's often the first thing that any good author says. Is they say, well, how did you write that book? And they usually say, well, I wrote what I know about. And that is often a great way. Experience is a wonderful teacher, and writing can sometimes be a great way to talk about and convey your experiences. When you use an essay that has a lot of examples, think about showing versus telling. So rather than just telling me what you did, show me why you did it. And so as you think about how you communicate events, how you communicate actions, it's always a little bit better to answer the why you took that action or the why you participated in that event than to spend lots of time on the what the event was or the what the action was. Those are far more interesting things to read about. This will all cause you to write more authentically and to be yourself, which is always important. And although it's a little bit in jest, it's not really in jest. Proofread. Use spell check, of course, but print out the essay, set it down, and then reread it a couple days later with some fresh eyes, and you'll be amazed at how many different things that you edit out. And I'll give it to Jen.
Yes, so a few don'ts in here. The first few are a little bit about the approach and the tone. And I mentioned this before, do not write what you think admission officers want to hear. We've been working in admission for a long time at multiple schools. And I've even shocked myself at how I can identify inauthenticity. We read hundreds, thousands of essays each cycle. So we can really tell when a student is being authentic. And just a hint, we're reading the whole application, and there's usually some themes, and we can usually see when something stands out a little bit differently from other things. So don't try to write what you think we want to hear, because sadly, I don't think that you'll be. I think you'd be surprised that we actually want to hear a bigger range of ideas and perspectives than you might think. We just really want to know who you are, because you might be that person that brings this totally new and unique perspective that we just haven't really seen. And if you take that away from us to see, then a detriment to you and your application. Don't exaggerate or write to impress. Adam said it earlier, some of the normal experiences that people have, the universal experiences that people have, so those are some of the essays that stick out in my mind as really insightful for you. It's actually quite impressive to spend that time to reflect and be insightful on like a quote unquote normal activity or normal event in life, and to just let yourself sort of sit and understand why that happens and what that means to you and how that has made you who you are and who you're going to become. The flowery, pretentious style, cliches, you don't need to get fancy. I don't, this isn't about impressing us with your writing style. I think stick to what you're good at with writing. When I first came into admission, the whole saying of, if no one's told you you're funny, don't try to be funny. I think that kind of applies here. Don't use this as a time to be overly experimental in the writing style or in that regard, just because that's not the point. The point for us is getting to know you. And so spending more energy on being reflective than trying to perfect some kind of new writing approach is better. The rambling, I tend to do that, but I will say for this one, it tends to be essays that come off as like a stream of consciousness kind of essay where it's hard to follow. It's a little bit difficult to kind of find the point if you just keep going and going and going. So try to rein it in, and that's where the proofreading and having other people look at it might help you catch some of that, because someone else will be able to identify that. We covered this, don't submit your first draft. You should definitely take some time. So start reasonably early, and definitely don't spend all of your time. Adam said it perfect. Set it aside, let your brain step away, and then come back to it. You'll be impressed on how fresh of a perspective you'll have.